Thank you, Kaela. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheyanne, and I'll be presenting with Kaela and Thomas on the effects of halogenated hydrocarbons on seabirds. Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. And I just wanted to put a warning on here that one of my slides has some kind of sad pictures of birth defects in some birds. So they're nothing too gory or crazy, but I just didn't want to surprise anyone with that. Okay. So halogenated hydrocarbons are organic compounds made of carbon and hydrogen, where at least one atom of hydrogen is replaced by a halogen. And halogens are the nonmetal elements found in group 17 of the periodic table, including the elements chlorine, bromine, and fluorine. Halogenated hydrocarbons are also just called halocarbons for short, or organohalogens. These halocarbons have a really extensive list of uses. A few examples are solvents like perchloroethylene, which is used in dry cleaning, and methylene chloride, which is a degreasing solvent. Chlorofluorocarbons are also common, which are used in refrigerants like Freon. And many chlorinated hydrocarbons are also used as insecticides and pesticides like DDT. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when these halocarbon compounds are released into the atmosphere, they can cause many health and environmental hazards. Halocarbons with lower molecular weights can be flammable and highly reactive, which makes them dangerous because they can cause violent reactions. Some compounds like halomethanes, which are methane derivatives with one or more hydrogens replaced by a halogen, can be asphyxiants in large concentrations because they reduce the amount of oxygen in the air. Many chlorinated hydrocarbons can also be toxic to the liver and kidneys when inhaled, and some of them, like methylene chloride, are also human carcinogens. And there are a lot of concerning environmental consequences that come from the release of these halocarbons, too. In the 1970s, it was discovered that halocarbons with chlorine and bromine cause depletion of the ozone layer because the UV radiation from the sun breaks them down, and then the free halogen ions can react with the ozone instead. Many of the compounds are also greenhouse gases, and even though they're much lower in concentration in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, the warming effect of halocarbons can be between 3,000 and 13,000 times greater. They also have very long residence times and can stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. Finally, it's important to note that halocarbons have proven to be particularly harmful to seabirds, which is what we'll be focusing on in our presentation, because birds make good bioindicators of pollutants and conditions in the environment. Okay, so organochlorines, which are hydrocarbons with at least one chlorine, are particularly widespread and problematic pollutants. They include insecticides like DDT, PCBs, which were used in hundreds of industrial and commercial applications, and dioxins that are produced in burning processes. And I'll go through some of these pollutants in more depth right after this. So all of these compounds are POPs, or persistent organic pollutants. And I know we all know what these are by now, so I'll keep my summary pretty short. So according to the International Pollutants Elimination Network, these are a class of highly hazardous chemical pollutants that are recognized as a serious global threat to human health and ecosystems. To be qualified as this kind of pollutant, they must remain in environments for a notably long period of time. They have to be able to get widely distributed in an environment by natural processes like transport through soil, water, and air. They bioaccumulate in living organisms and are in highest concentration at the higher levels of the food chain. And finally, they must be toxic to both humans and wildlife. So organochlorine pollutants have all of these characteristics, and their concentrations are generally low in seabirds from remote islands, and they're higher in those that feed near industrialized and agricultural areas where these POPs have been mostly released. Okay, thank you, sorry. So one of the most well-known POPs and organochlorines is DDT. This insecticide was used in the 40s and 50s to kill off the mosquitoes that transported malaria and other insects that carried diseases. So this top picture is a structure of DDT, and you can see that it's an organic compound with chlorines replacing some hydrogens. People began to notice that DDT was harming the environment when robin populations declined in Michigan. They inferred that earthworms were consuming the DDT, and then the birds were accumulating lethal concentrations of the pesticide in their lipids as they preyed on more worms. This bioaccumulation was seen especially in seabirds as they consumed fish at higher levels of the marine food chain. DDT also harmed bird populations by causing significant eggshell thinning. The pollutant altered their calcium metabolism, which led to them giving birth to babies with weak shells. And this bottom picture is from a common tern nest on Long Island in the 70s. And it shows that when birds tried sitting on their eggs to incubate them, they would crush the shells and kill the babies. So this problem drastically reduced populations of brown and white pelicans across North America. It exterminated the peregrine falcon in the eastern US, and it also hurt populations of golden and bald eagles. The reduction in bird populations due to DDT inspired Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring, which ignited an environmental movement against pesticides in 1962. And before we go to the next slide, just a warning, the next one is the one with a couple graphic pictures on it. So, okay, so another kind of detrimental organochlorine is the PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls. This is a group of man-made chlorinated hydrocarbons that had a wide range of commercial and industrial uses before they were banned in 1979. They had hundreds of purposes, and just a few of them include the cable insulation, transformers, and switches used for electrical equipment, plasticizers in paints, plastics, and rubber, pigments and dyes, and oil for motors and hydraulic systems. So before the mid-1970s, PCB concentrations were linked to a long list of health complications of fish-eating birds, and the study we'll be looking at was from birds in the Great Lakes. The main seabirds that these were recorded in were the double-crested cormorant, the herring gull, the Forster's gull, and the common tern. The birds suffered from increased embryo mortality, excessive fluid around the heart and in their cells, growth retardation, liver damage, and abnormal breeding behavior that led to poor parental care. But one of the most disturbing and widespread effects of PCBs was the developmental defects that it caused. So this uppermost picture shows a cormorant with a deformed upper mandible, and this was taken in 1989. The picture to the right shows a herring gull chick that had extra legs that hatched in 1972. And the bottom picture is from Long Island, actually, in the 70s, and it shows abnormal down and feather production that was a common result of PCB and other POPs as well. Okay, so another category of the halogenated hydrocarbons is the organobromides, which are organic compounds with at least one carbon bonded to a bromine instead of chlorine. So they're commonly used as flame retardants because they interfere with combustion chemistry. And polybrominated diphenyl ethers, or PBDEs, are one of the most concerning organobromides because of their bioaccumulation and persistence in environments. They're often used as flame retardant additives in plastic, foam, electronics, and fabrics. But in 2009, they were recognized as harmful POPs by the Stockholm Convention. And since they were banned, their levels in the environment have declined, but they're still an issue because they've bioaccumulated in top predators. The most widespread consequence of PBDE contamination is that it can affect thyroid gland hormone production. These hormones are essential because they regulate metabolism and thermogenesis in birds. So when their metabolism is impeded by PBDE, birds have shown reduced growth rates. And thermogenesis is their production of heat, so it's dangerous for this to be thrown off because it keeps them warm and it allows them to keep their nest warm. So in a study from 2016, it was also found that PBDE exposure caused many behavioral changes related to reproduction in several different bird species. They found that male zebra finches were singing less, and male American kestrels spent less time engaging in pair bonding behavior with their mates.
So going into more organic compounds that harm seabirds, we have a group known as perfluorinated compounds. These are organofluorine compounds consisting of only carbon fluorines and C-C bonds, but also other heteroatoms. It is important to know what PFCs are and their harm on seabirds since they heavily impact reproduction, seabirds' immune function, hormone and vitamin homeostasis, biotransformation enzymes, and may lead to cancer risk. The dysregulation of immune system homeostasis leads to changes in immune functions, increasing their susceptibility to infections and cancer. Specifically, researchers discovered a relation between PFCs and thyroid hormone homeostasis. Reports recorded several different biochemical effects and endpoints. Some of these notably being modulated hormone concentrations and ratios, competitive displacement for plasma binding proteins, increased or inhibited metabolism of hormones, along with other observed anatomical effects, and increased interconversion of hormones. A study was conducted where they found that high concentrations of PSCs were present in kittiwake and fulmar chicks, helping demonstrate the susceptibility seabirds have to PSCs. In this study, it was made apparent that there was an association between PSCs and thyroid hormones, raising concern about the effects of these compounds on birds. The image to the right is a visual representation of what a perfluorinated compound structure looks like. So now that we know of these organic compounds and the effects they have on seabirds, as well as other organisms, it will help to understand why scientists use seabirds as pollutant bioindicators. Seabird sensitivity to toxicity, their observability, and correlation with habitats make them good pollutant bioindicators. For example, birds can be detected easily as they show their presence through vocalization. By making noises, it is possible for researchers to easily locate where they are. Birds' presence, abundance, and ability to be influenced by surrounding habitats makes them cost-effective and informative on determining the effects of disturbances, contamination, and the effects of pollutants, organic substances, and oil spills of the marine environment. Specifically, seabirds often are used as bioindicators of marine environments, thanks to the cause-effect relationship they have with microclimate and habitats. In addition, they exploit a broad scale of habitat, they respond quickly to environmental changes, and can be surveyed over a large spatial scale. Seabirds indicate a status of habitat, reduction in food occurrence and abundance, rate of the predation, and effect of weather or climate change, and threats. Furthermore, seabirds are closely associated with intersite more distinctly than other animals. They may breed in the same site each year, which helps indicate to researchers that an area may have been affected by pollutants, and are easy to catch when incubating and during rearing chicks. For example, seabirds are more prone to marine oil spills than most other animals as they spend most of their life at sea, and their populations are mostly concentrated in coastal areas and offshore habitats. These habitats are prone to oil spills, making seabird survivability very low. I would like to also bring back up POPs, also known as persistent organic pollutants. As my other groupmate has explained what POPs are and the harm they may cause, I will address how POPs spread, further stressing the importance it is on removing them. POPs are often passed to offspring during pregnancy and breastfeeding. During this portion of time, humans and animals are extremely vulnerable. At this point is usually when they are exposed to the highest levels of POPs. It can be noted that humans and animals are most vulnerable when they are in the womb, during infancy, and when their bodies, brains, nervous systems, and immune systems are going through the process of construction, making them very delicate. Furthermore, the transport of POPs depends on the temperature. POPs often jump around, meaning they evaporate in warm areas, ride the wind and dust particles, then settle in Earth's coolest areas. Earth's coolest areas are usually bodies of water, which are where most seabirds will stay by, meaning they impact seabirds a large amount. After settling in these bodies of water, the POPs will eventually vaporize and move on again. In order to lessen the harm POPs cause on animals and humans, the United States has issued to stop DDT use, gained more control over dioxins, and has limited the distribution of certain POPs listed in the Stockholm Convention. In 1970, the USDA stopped DDT use on crops, commercial plants, wood products, and its use in building properties. Currently, the US does not allow for the selling or distribution of DDT. The proposed Clean Air Act helped to monitor air pollutants such as dioxins and furans, further aiding in lessening the impacts of POPs and other compounds. The Stockholm Convention addressed the problems posed by POPs, tackling 21 of the worst POPs ever created. The image on this slide is actually the logo for the Stockholm Convention. Okay. So 14 of the current POPs are pesticides, one of them notably being DDT, as mentioned before, which can contaminate the milk of nursing mothers and has been known for killing eagles. Some other examples of these pesticides are cordane and several byproducts of lindane production. This convention also targets industrial chemicals, several of which have been noted to kill many fish and other organisms. Most notably of these are the previously mentioned PCBs and pentabromodiphenyl ethers.
Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas Jenson, and I'm going to be talking about how to protect yourself and the environment from halogenated hydrocarbons. The most obvious way is to decrease the amount of halogenated hydrocarbons that you use, but this isn't always possible. Because the use of halogenated hydrocarbons and other toxic chemicals can't be avoided, it is best to take the proper precautions when using them to protect yourself and the environment. OSHA, also known as Operational Safety and Health Administration, has set up guidelines to help protect humans from being exposed to toxic chemicals. There's also ways in which to remove these contaminants from the environment that I'll be going into later on. These methods are phytoremediation, bioremediation, and chemical remediation. So now I'm going to be talking about a few of the many guidelines that OSHA has to help protect humans from these toxic chemicals. 1910 subpart G is OSHA's occupational health and environmental control policies. In this section, they talk about a number of different requirements, along with 1910 subpart H, which goes over things workplaces must do when dealing with hazardous materials. There's one part that has a little bit of a focus on a product that halogenated hydrocarbons are used in, and this part is called 1020.107. This is titled Spray Finishing Using Flammable and Combustible Materials. Just a note, OSHA has over 20 plus policies in place, but I'll be going over just a basic one and a few that I think are important. When using a spray, they require that a spray booth is used. This enclosed or separated structure to spray in helps confine and limit the amount of spray, vapor, and residue that enters the environment. And this spray ultimately is directed out through a exhaust system. 1910.94A15 requires that there's a dust collector, which is a device or combination of devices that separates the dust from the clean air in the ventilation system. Along with many of the requirements OSHA has, if this chemical and or exposure is not below the limit that is recommended, which I could not find the exact number. I believe it varies depending on which chemical is being used. The use of breathing equipment, gloves, and skin protection should be used. OSHA has many other requirements that can be found on their website that will be in the resources if anybody is interested in that. So phytoremediation is the removal of halogenated hydrocarbons and other chemicals in general from the environment. Not only does removing chemicals from the environment help protect you from an array of damaging effects, but it also protects the ecosystem and different species. As I said, phytoremediation is one way in which hydrocarbons are removed. This is when plants are used for degradation and extraction of the contaminants in the air, water, and the soil and ground. Due to the fact that the plants have been in nature for so long, they've found ways in which to deal with a number of pollutants. Some of these methods are through absorption, translocation, and transportation. Some plants are actually able to take in halogenated substances into their oxidative degradation pathways and move the halogen atom. Some of the enzymes in plants that are able to do this are called oxygenases, nitroreductases, and phosphates. The roots of the plants are able to take in chemicals from the soil and stabilize them before they're released back into the atmosphere. And here I found a simple picture of what phytoremediation, the processes of it. There's a lot of technical terms, but I think this breaks it down nicely. So bioremediation is a method that is used to treat soil that is polluted. In order to do this, though, there are a few things that must be met. These things include the addition of fertilizer, control of the moisture content, aeration and mixing, and a specific pH. This technique is used to eliminate or detoxify pollutants through a biodegradation process, and this is able to happen by introducing microorganisms. Microorganisms convert different pollutants to either non-toxic or useful substances, and these microorganisms include bacteria, fungi, and yeast. One of the most important things to note about bioremediation is that it is one of the most cost-effective and non-invasive ways in which to remove chemicals. And from what I've read, many of the times when this is used, they use local fungi and bacteria to help um, in the process. So soil fungi is effective 6 to 82% of the time in biodegradation, marine bacteria 0.003 to 100%, and soil bacteria 13 to 50%. And you might be thinking that these numbers are not very high or that they don't seem too successful, or there's a wide range, but oftentimes this, along with another technique or process, is used to help ensure that hydrocarbons are removed from the environment. Next, I'm going to be talking about chemical remediation. Chemical remediation is the last way in which hydrocarbons are removed from the environment. 3 different types of chemicals are used for this. They are called dispersants, solidifiers, and chemical oxidants. The purpose of these chemicals is to change the chemical and physical properties of the contaminant. Dispersants are used when a bunch of droplets are dropped into the water, which help dilute the water and in the end degrade the oil. These dispersants raise the surface area of the oil droplets, which allows biodegradation to happen at a faster speed. This method is used to help limit the amount of damage done to marine life and organisms. Solidifiers are used to make oil go from a liquid state to a more solid state. A way in which they're able to do this is by soaking up the oil with a sponge, and this is just one of many solidifiers that are used. The drawback to this method, though, is that it is hard to retrieve the solidifiers after they solidify. And this picture here to the right, I did find that they were able to collect the solidifier, but I could not find any statistics on how often they are able to retrieve the solidifiers and how much is actually lost in the environment. And lastly, chemical oxidation is the last chemical remediation used. This method uses chemicals that are able to oxidize the pollutant. These chemicals are injected to the site of the pollutant, and it is used in soil and water contamination. And interesting thing about this is that it is able to be used in all different weather conditions, which is a major advantage for these methods.